Okay, I got it. It's on.
We'll just give everybody a few minutes since we're 2 minutes ahead, but we're connected, which is good.
Brad's got the song and dance, bringing the horse and pony show ahead of time.
One more minute and we'll start.
Man, Facebook is so slow recently.
Yes, it is.
Like, I'm trying to pull this all up, and oh my Lanta, is it slow?
I think it's because all the kids in the country are on their computers and Wi-Fi. It's dragging everything down.
All right, I see it.
Is it streaming?
It is.
Yes.
I see it.
Nine o'clock. We all set?
I think so.
Good.
Before we start, happy National Dog Day, everyone.
Yay.
Yay.
All right. Thanks everybody for joining us tonight. Tonight's presentation is on paranormal investigation procedures and protocols. Now, this is a very flexible guideline of how to conduct a paranormal investigation from start to finish, from client intake to sending out the report. So you may not use all of this. You may use some of it. Some teams may do things completely differently depending on the team you're on. But for those of you who don't know how to conduct an investigation properly, you can take this guide and adapt it to however it'll work best for you. But we want you to have something. So we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to share my screen. And set up. All right.
It is.
So I entitled this, Help, I Think My House is Haunted? ? Paranormal investigation procedures and protocols. This is a standard operating guideline for investigations. The purpose of this guideline is to provide a flexible framework in which an investigation should operate from start to finish. And flexible is the key word. You can take this and form it to however will work best for you and your team. Who wants to start with the client intake from the phone interview all the way to the questionnaire? Linda.
Okay. So client intake, phone interview, written questionnaires sent to client, schedule an investigation, announcement to team, chain of command, team leader, case manager, assigns duties, research the location, history, geological data, etc. The week of the investigation, confirm with client, get parking details, equipment, base camp setup, location discussed with client, coordinate travel plans with team. Also ask, does the client prefer no team shirts for privacy from neighbors?
So let's do a client intake and phone interview. How do the rest of you do it? My team, the person contacts us. We first do a phone interview, and then we send out the extensive written questionnaire. And if they get through that written questionnaire, we pretty much know they're serious, because that will weed out a lot of people that are just watching paranormal TV and want to see what it's about. So how do the rest of you do it?
I've had some folks contact me and we do the initial phone interview with them. and we tell them that we're going to send out the questionnaire, and they don't want any part of the questionnaire. They just want instant action.
Yeah.
They want us to come out immediately, and then at that point is when we'll try to get most of the questionnaire taken care of. Then, we'll get there a couple hours early and try to get as much information as possible then.
Yeah, along those lines, we kind of force everybody through a form that's kind of the questionnaire up front.
Mhm.
And that kind of limits a lot of the crazies and the attention seekers and that kind of
Yes.
stuff, or the druggies. I mean, you have both, all that. And then
Yes, you do.
we force them through that form portal, and then one of us, we have these regional directors from our organization. There's about 30 of us
Mhm.
in the state, and we have these regional directors, and one of those will call them if they're in their region to see what's going on and do and get one of our police officer interrogation experts to speak to them. That's how we handle that.
The thing is, with the interviews is sometimes when they first call, they are hyper and excited, and that first interview is that bear flew off that shelf and hit the wall. They're totally freaked out. By the third interview, when you're meeting them in person, well, the bear just kind of fell over. So interviewing extensively and more than once to see if the answers change are very important, because flying across the room and hitting the wall is totally different from the bear just fell over. So there's reasons why we go through these extensive client questionnaires, because you don't want to end up wasting your time.
Yep. I think,
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say the one thing that I just started doing is for the phone interview, instead of doing a phone interview, we do a Skype interview and we record it so the whole team can see it.
Good idea.
Never thought of that one.
Yeah, we always record ours, every single interview, whether it's the phone one or the meeting in person, because then you can listen back and find those discrepancies in the story, how it's changed and evolved, and then you know where to go from there.
So after
That's a big thing, definitely. I know Brad and I, for example, just worked on a case together very recently, where we really didn't get past the interview phase. And the big thing about that is when we started, the very first thing, for our intake is call us, send us an email, that sort of thing. From there, we have a set list of questions with some flexibility for something very, if you have specific things to your investigation, so you can tailor your questions a little bit. But by far and large, you're looking for times, dates, locations, witnesses, key things, right? And like Linda and Heather said, record everything. You need to know your state's laws, especially for audio and visual recording. I know here in Virginia that if one of the two parties consents to it, and so that means if it's me and Brad, for example, and if I want to record that conversation, I give myself consent and I can record it, and that's for audio. So you need to make sure you understand your state's laws when investigating, when interviewing. And on top of that, we always set that expectation up immediately. When I get onto the phone call, when I get to a location, hey, I need you to understand that we're going to be videotaping this. We're going to be audio recording this. And this is so that we can go back and the entire team can review some of these, your interview. Like you said, Philip.
Don't forget, Steve, it's not just the recording that you got to worry about. It's the sharing of the recording too.
Yes.
Since you consented in the state of Virginia, one of the parties consents to it being shared, it can be shared anywhere. So it's a single consent law here. So yeah, it's not only the recording, but also the sharing of the recording.
And so like you said, we do something similar where we'll share it with the team, because we don't need 6 investigators sitting down to interview one person. That becomes an interrogation, and you want to make sure that the client is comfortable. And you need to build a level of trust. Like you said, Philip, things change when you are going through this. And that's something that Brad and I just saw very recently, where the story changed so many times that credibility was lost, unfortunately, and we weren't able to validate anything any longer. So always don't stop interviewing. This is like phase one. You have to do this before going any further, but don't stop interviewing the entire time. Think of these questions, rephrase them a little differently. See if you get something different. Ask somebody else, because that is going to be key to understanding what's going on at that location.
And one of our
And that-
educators, Martha Decker, wrote a book on interviewing called Paranormal Profiling. And she, sometime when she's working on another book now, she has to finish, but she's going to do a presentation on how to interview. Because there's a lot of things that's in that interview that, you all need to know what to ask for. Medications, not just how old's the house, has anybody died in the house? You've got to find out about the people in the house for your safety as well as possibly their safety if they're nuts. After we've determined that, yes, there is a need for an investigation, then we schedule the date and announce it to the team. Chain of command, team leader or case manager assigns duties. I mean, you need to be organized. Who's going to do what at an investigation, or you're going to run around in circles and waste a lot of time. Assign who's taking baseline readings, who's setting up equipment, who's doing the DVR or cameras. Have a roster and have it agreed upon who's doing what when you get to the location. Do you guys do that too?
Yeah, and the big thing here is know the location, know where you're going, get an address and look at the house. Pull it up on Google Maps. See if you can identify the layout. Even check Zillow so you can get an idea of when the house was built, the size of the house. Because if you've got a team, for example, I have a team of 13. Brad said he has 30 some people. If just one of our groups descended on a private residence, it better be a mansion. So, don't send more than you need to. Understand the location, never go alone. And if it takes 3 people, that's what it takes. You're there to assist the client. I know that there can be when you're in investigation groups, a little bit of a jealousy issue that, oh, these 3 people get to go and I don't. You need to keep in mind when you're assigning these duties that it is for the betterment of the client and ensuring that whatever they need is met. Not your team. It's not about your team. It's about the client.
And we to get around that a little bit, like what Steve was talking about, we set up a skill center setup where we have different skill centers. An audio skill center, a video skill center, a data logger analysis skill center, an equipment setup skill center. That kind of stuff. And we have people when in our organization, we all have these where our names are in all these different skill centers. And then when I'm the research coordinator. So if something comes through and we've actually have to go somewhere, then I have to go to these skill centers. It's like, well, I need this skill set. I need this skill set. I need this skill set. And that's also based on something we're going to talk about in a little bit about experimental design. But it's, we have, so everybody in our organization knows they're part of a skill center. And so they understand that if we need somebody in that skill center, we're going to grab somebody from that skill center. And we may not need somebody that does data logger analysis. We might just need somebody that does audio or somebody that just does general interviewing skills or something like that. That's kind of how we do that, to try to get away from the jealousy and stuff, because we have had that in the past.
Oh, jealousy in the paranormal?
No.
The team that I was on had a way of doing it. They were more science-based, and only the intake person, the case manager, and the team leader knew what the reported activities in the home were. No one else knew. Everyone went in cold so that they would not be biased and be looking for anything in particular. I don't know a lot of teams that do that now, but that's something you guys that are listening may want to think about. If you really don't want to go in expecting something to happen, don't let your team members know what the reported activity is. Just have the 2 leaders, the one that took the call and the one leading the investigation, know what's going on. And once you've got everything organized, the week of the investigation, confirm with the client again, first early in the week, because things come up. And there's a lot of planning that goes into one of these investigations, as we all know. The thing we like to do is get the parking details. Can we park on the street? Is there enough parking? Is there, do you have a driveway? Because, that will tell you if you need a carpool or not. Sometimes you'll get to a location like there's nowhere to park. So you need to, discuss these things. And I like to have discussed with the client, where in our house would you like us to set up? So we already know we're not having to deal with that once we get there. The team shirts. Some people say no. The team that I was on, they would always ask. A funny story quickly. We were in front of this house. Two of us were standing there while the team leader went in the house. I had my team shirt on. I was new at the time. And this car kept driving by and turning around, driving by and turning around. He finally stopped, rolled down the windows and said, "Are y'all paranormal investigators?" We're like, "Yeah." He said, "I just want to thank y'all for what y'all do. I just really appreciate what y'all do." Well, that's really nice. Is your house haunted? We'll be over.
I will say on that, for us, we don't allow any of our team members to wear our team shirts. The biggest reason is when you're going into some of these houses, depending on the neighborhood. I mean, you guys know we all have that nosy neighbor.
Oh, yeah.
Some of us might be the nosy neighbor, and so look at Brad. And so you want to make sure, again, going back to the laws of your state. There actually are laws in some states that require you to, if you have a paranormal investigator in, or if you are experiencing something like that, you actually have to disclose that when you go to sell your home. I know that that's not the case in Virginia. It's commonly thought that it is, but you're dispelling that. You're also, anybody that's kind of looking, being nosy. I know a lot of our clients don't want other people to know because they don't want to sound like they're crazy.
Yeah.
And so we don't allow team shirts when we're going in. We also try to meet at a location maybe a block away or so, because everybody's going to be arriving at different times. We don't want any opportunity for a person to be there solo by themselves with the client whatsoever. First off, if you have an experience, it's hard to prove it because that becomes a personal experience. It's not something that's the group has shared. Therefore, it kind of leaves that realm of single witness. But it's really for safety in numbers. So make sure you get there together, no matter how you do it. Consider not wearing a shirt just because it's a little bit more comfortable. And the other thing is, if a client is asking you to meet at the Starbucks or something, if you can, and if they're comfortable with it, try to do it at their home. Especially because that is where they're experiencing the phenomena. You're going to be going there at some point, theoretically, and they're going to be a little bit more comfortable. You need to set a level of trust and comfortability so that these folks will share with you what's going on. They're not going to just come out and say everything right off the bat unless you find somebody like with a big mouth like me. So you need to set that level of confidence and trust.
That's why I have arrive at location together as a unit, because first of all, it looks more professional and you don't want anyone solo. But the morning of the investigation is when you want to collect your atmospheric data, all those kinds of things, which I posted on our page, the Ghost Weather app, which is just, it's got it all right there. I'm sure Brad's got a better app we could use, website for that. But you want to get all that stuff in the morning so you've got it in your data and you don't forget it. And one thing about
I wanted to tell you, you just have you brought up the other site. So believe it or not, Weather Underground has just about all this except for the geomagnetic activity. And we actually get the geomagnetic activity off of the GOES satellite data from the Space Weather Prediction Center that NASA has. So that's the two sites that we use for that.
Okay. And as far as interviewing clients at their home, our team, when possible, if they aren't too far away, try to meet them outside of their home, because we want to see if they're more relaxed outside of the home, because the inside of the home is where the activity, where they're really frightened. And then maybe there's something they don't want to say. Maybe there's another family member at home that they don't want to say something in front of. So we try to do it outside the home for the interview, but that's just, everyone's going to do it differently. We all agree to disagree.
As
And when you
far-
bring up the reconfirming with the client, a really good point is to establish who is going to be there and limit the amount. We have gotten there and it's Party USA. The family's there, the neighbors are
Yeah.
there. You can't conduct an investigation without contamination with all
That
that.
is incredibly important, guys. What Linda said, I can't tell you how many cases that we've gone out on. And that's actually a very big learning lesson when you go out to these cases starting off. At the very beginning, and I know we talk about it a little bit in here, but we set the interview and the investigation on the same day. And so we'd go out, we'd say, okay, we're going to schedule 1 hour for the interview, and then we're going to investigate immediately afterwards. And you will be surprised how many people will invite their neighbors over. I walked in and there were 4 women sitting in a kitchen drinking wine, and they asked us when the filming crew was going to get there. We immediately packed up and walked out.
Yeah.
So set up your interview if it's within reach, reasonable distance driving. Try to set up your interview at least maybe a day, or actually we do a week or two ahead of time, if that's how you want to operate. Different people operate differently, but we separate the interview so that we can identify if there's something going on, if there's drugs in the house, if there is a mental illness, because you can get in big trouble if you go in and you identify that there's a mental illness and something happens. We use a resource that Brad's team has, and invaluable, absolutely invaluable. But you can separate it. It's not a bad idea. That way you aren't walking into a party.
And going back to not wearing the shirts to embarrass them, I've had at least 5 investigations where we've done all the steps. Everything is going perfect. We get to the day of the investigation, and anywhere between 4 to 6 hours out, they call and say, no, they just flat chicken out. They don't want any part of it anymore. And then some even called back and reset it up 2 or 3 times, and they canceled at the last minute, because I don't know if they were just toying with us or they were really that scared to find out what was in their house.
And if, on what Cliff was saying, everybody's probably had that happen to them. But one thing that we figured out a long time ago, you got to make sure that the people calling you actually own the property, or they have the permission of the people that own the property. Because we actually were on our way to a location, and we were called by our team founder and told to turn around and come back, because the owner of the location was waiting on us with a gun, because they weren't the ones that called us. And so, we had to turn around and change that. Plus, a lot of renters will actually sometimes try to get out of their leases by saying the place is haunted. And at that point, if you don't have the permission of the homeowner, you're in a lot of trouble. And when you're talking legal stuff, like what Steve mentioned too, about how you could get in a lot of trouble if you go into a place and there's a lot of mental illness involved there. There've been, we've had occasion where we've been called in for a second opinion, and we go there and it turns out the person has a serious mental conditions on 3 different antipsychotic meds. And then the team that was there before us told them that they had a demon because their K2 meter lit up like a Christmas tree. And it turns out it was just a bad, clock radio.
That's
And
why we're
so,
here.
yeah. And so
Why we're having this group.
yeah, but that right there, that gets into fraud and gross negligence too. So you got to be careful with that stuff, because different state laws, they will come after you legally. And that is happening across the country right now. So you got to be very careful. Make sure you know your laws. Make sure you know what you're allowed to say, what you're not allowed to say. Make sure that, that if you say something that can't be proven, that could be considered gross negligence. So you got to be very careful about that kind of thing.
And go over all those things in the interview and the questionnaire. If you own the property, all those questions. Now, they may not tell the truth, but you'll find out when you get there, like we've done several times. It's like, oh, you left out, you've been put in a mental institution 3 times? That wasn't in the in
So
your
I feel like
questionnaire.
going down that, I'm going to, if it's okay with you, Philip, I'll interject with questions as people have them because I think it's contextually
Okay.
works. Adrian is asking, do you have questionnaires for clients that include questions such as mental illness, medication, drug use?
Absolutely.
Yep.
So
Absolutely.
yeah, definitely.
And we say this is, will be confidential. This will not be shared. Nobody's going to see it but us. And we explain why we need that information. Not just, oh, you take antipsychotics. Well, we need to know that it may play a part of what's going on in your house because maybe something negative is attracted to the weakest link in the house. There's all kinds of reasons we need to know why you're on antipsychotic drugs. So, yes.
In that situation, though, you got to be careful with HIPAA laws too.
Mhm.
So that's if you honestly say you're not going to share it, you better not.
Nope.
Because at that point, not only is it considered fraud, but it's then considered violation of HIPAA, and that's a felony. So you got to be very careful about that.
I think it's also a big thing. This is where establishing trust and a level of confidence is huge. Because, if somebody asked, hey, Steve, what medications do you take? I'm going to be like, what, screw off. But, if you come from the standpoint of you do care about this, you need to go into these client cases with the right intentions and the right reasons. And if you bring that, bring your best foot forward and really are there to help these folks, you need to make sure that you build that level of trust and that communication, make them comfortable, because things like that, knowing if they're on sleeping medications, even the most basic of things, in the right environmental conditions can create paranormal experiences. And you need to be able to look at those and research them and understand if there's any correlation with everything else.
Heather, do you want to go start with this one?
Yeah. Okay, so when you arrive, you want to greet the client and do a walkthrough. Designated team members conduct a walkthrough of the location with the client, documenting the walkthrough, noting discussion with the client, safety issues, and where equipment may be placed. Then before you continue, have the client sign all appropriate liability release forms. After that point, you can have your sensitive or medium walkthrough, document their impressions and possible hotspots for equipment placement, and then unpack the equipment setup while remaining mindful of any property and to avoid damage.
So let's go back to the walkthrough where we say record everything, go in with the camera rolling.
Yeah, we actually wear body cameras.
Yes.
And we have them on from before the time we let the client know that they'll be on before we walk in the door, but we have them rolling just in case we capture anything, and then also for our protection as well.
So let's talk about what forms we're talking about so the viewers will know what we're talking about and the seriousness of it. Liability forms, what do you guys do? I mean, ours is, release from any harm brought, just liability for anything.
Yeah.
And also, says that we will not share this information. One of our forms, can we share evidence publicly? Can we share it like in a presentation? Do you not want any of it shared? Do you want some of it shared? And of course, that will be discussed with the client in the final report, because, if you get something that you possibly want to put in a presentation, you want to have permission.
Sorry. Yeah, we also have permission, a form permitting us to be on their property.
Yes.
Yeah, we have that too.
And make sure they get signed by the homeowner too.
Yeah.
Not the renter, the homeowner.
Got this
We
guy
also
down the street that
include-
signed for it.
We also include the permission that that they're fully aware that audio and video is going for the entire process, because they may say it's okay, but then if they come back, we do have it in the form where we can say, no, you did agree to this.
Yes.
You knew that it was going to be running from the minute we got started to, the very end of the evening. We've run into that too, where we've had to bring the form out and say, did you read what you signed? Because not only are we protecting your property, we're protecting us too. And that's very clear there.
And we have, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
We have 2 copies, one for us, one for them. They signed both, and we leave them copies of everything that they signed.
Right.
So
Now, also when you talk about signing release forms too, you need to check your state laws again, because every state's different, and a liability form in Virginia may not be the same as one in Texas or one in Louisiana.
Right.
And I can't say those two places because of the hurricane, but the some places actually require that those release forms be notarized. And so you got to be very, very careful about that too, because if you get one signed and it had to be notarized, but it's not, it doesn't really mean anything legally. So be careful with that too.
We do have someone else from the team witness the signatures though, and they sign it as a witness, but at least you've got something on paper. All right.
Yeah, we do the same thing. We have a liability release for the client as well as for us. And we also have non-disclosure where, like you said, if we want to utilize any of the findings at any point in time, that it does need express approval from the homeowner, not, one of the kids or anything like that. It, like Brad said, it has to be from the homeowner, the person that signed the documentation. Otherwise, we don't talk about it outside of the team whatsoever. It's the best way to handle it.
Talking about that, basically people in this state, you don't realize that if you have a document that says that you're not responsible for gross negligence while you're on the property, believe it or not, that document, even if it's signed and notarized, means nothing, because state law says that gross negligence can be acted upon legally regardless of whatever form you signed. So, it's really good to know what your state laws are in regards to all these release forms. And the release forms we do are actually case specific. Each location we go to, or each project we might work on, might require a different kind of release form, which may not be standardized at all. So then we have to go and find somebody with a legal mind to come up and go ahead and write the thing up for us so we can get this taken care of. Yeah,
if you know anybody that is in law, like John Harris commented, I often wonder if the court of law would a generic release of liability hold up, or should your documents be prepared by an attorney? If you have somebody that can look over your documentation, definitely do it. If you can call in a favor or something, definitely have someone take a peek at it. It doesn't hurt. And like Brad said, it will only go so far. Unfortunately, it'll more than likely get shredded by a lawyer in court, but it'll at least help cover you for quite a bit of ways.
That you were at least doing due diligence to inform them of these things that could happen. Rather than not having any form or telling them anything, at least you've got something in your hand where you say you discuss these things with them. Equipment, unpack, and setup. Now that's going to go under assigned duties, like who's setting up DVR, if you use DVRs, who's setting up, just different things. Things go much more smoothly when duties are assigned on who's doing what when you get to a location. Do y'all use DVRs on your teams?
I do on some. It just depends on how big of the location is.
Yeah.
Just about every one of our research projects, we use a DVR, and we'll run upwards of 24 to 32 cameras at a time. But that's usually has to do not necessarily with detecting anomalies or detecting manifestations, but with actual security, and also keeping an eye on the equipment that we're using to collect our other data. So that's one of the biggest reasons we do it. We do we've probably captured 4 things on video that we can't explain, but most of the time it's just to make sure that the equipment itself isn't being tampered with.
Yeah.
Not that Steve would do that or anything, but we just want to make sure everything's not tampered with.
Next, still pictures. After you've set up equipment prior to going lights out, photograph the location for later comparison, for equipment placement, reference, and for property damage liability. Do you take still pictures?
I have a guy on my team that is his specialty. That's all he does is take stills.
Yeah.
Okay, get out. You're done.
Leave.
Yeah.
We do include him on other things, but that's the one thing he likes to do right off the bat is take all the before pictures.
Yeah.
I'm with Cliff. We have a photographer and he's allowed to stay, but That's basically his job. He takes inside, outside, all night long. He's just taking still pictures.
And even if you don't have a photographer, though, anybody with a cell phone camera can go around and take a bunch of pictures.
Oh yeah,
So,
absolutely.
don't feel like that you need to have a photographer in your organization to be able to do something like that. It just so happens we do, but you don't have to do something like that.
Right.
Oh, absolutely.
It's definitely important because if anything changes, during the evening, especially if it's rooms that you haven't been in, client hasn't been in, things like that, and on top of that, if you're utilizing a DVR, you can go through and compare. Okay, this is what it looked like
Mhm.
at the beginning of the evening. This is what it looked like at the end of the evening. Now let's find the time in between that this thing changed.
Absolutely. So after you've done all your photos, do the baseline readings, which EMF, temperature, carbon monoxide. Now people are testing for radiation. Anything else you guys check for?
It depends on the project. I'll get more into that later, but when we do a research project, sometimes like what we've done in Hanover Tavern with Steve, we've looked at geomagnetic field intensities on all three axes: temperature, humidity, barometric pressure, ultraviolet light, visible light, vibration, ionizing radiation, like you just said. One thing to remember, though, is you're talking about taking baseline readings. Sometimes you need to do that if your equipment doesn't log data over time.
Mm-hmm.
But if your data, if your equipment logs the data, the readings over time, and it's static and you're not moving it around, because believe it or not, what you see on TV with people moving those things around, it causes the sensors to totally misread. So you got to be very careful with that too. But if you have something that data logs, you can just set it there static over time. It will collect that data, and you can actually look at it graphically and be able to detect anomalies without doing hardcore statistical analysis or whatever. You can actually see it graphically. It's really nice.
Yeah, we discussed that. Oh yeah, I did forget barometric pressure there. But the EDI that we went over in the equipment presentation, logs the data.
Right. But what's important is before we got our EDI, the baseline reading is very important, but then we would periodically recheck every hour or so just to make sure, and check, are there any changes? Well, what caused those changes? What's going on?
Another thing to check for is, especially if the client is reporting like cold spots, check the windows and doors. Make sure they're sealed. We actually use a temperature. It's like a digital thermometer that takes an average of an area, like a spot, and check to see if there is any significant change. You're going to see it on the window itself, but see if you can detect any airflow coming in from any of those spots. Especially older homes, you're going to have some of that where even though the windows are closed, you're still getting a breeze coming through, and that can be a really good reason for a cold spot to occur, especially if it's always in the same spot.
And the thermal camera is really helpful with doing that too.
Mm-hmm.
So after we've got all this done, safety briefing, brief team on any safety concerns or last minute updates. You want to make sure everyone on your team's feeling comfortable, and at any point during the night that they're not feeling comfortable, have your plan in place for whatever it is you need to do if they need to leave, or you have a client that gets real sketchy later on in the evening. Do you have a code word you can pass around that means we're getting out of here? Have your safety situations lined up ahead of time. Do you guys have any kind of like we got to go kind of thing?
Basically, we just say we got to go.
Yeah, time's up. Gotta go.
Time's up. I gotta clean my sock drawer. I'll catch you later.
Another thing, and I always say it, never go alone. Don't put yourself into, even if you're at a location with 3 people. Let's say you take, it's a rancher, you can only fit 3 people on your team in there. Try to do your best to stick together, because if something does occur and you are isolated from your team, that's not going to put you into a good situation. Safety is key in these things. So, you should be with the ability to communicate with your team quietly. You don't need to be like, hey, everybody, we got to go. We got to get out of here. It's getting crazy, but quietly notify your team who should be within arm's reach of you so that you can safely navigate that situation.
And again, that's where all the TV shows steer some of these newcomers the wrong direction, because you see them go off one at a time. You
Right.
go that way, you go that way, and no, at least two at all times.
And do not stick somebody in a room with a burlap sack over their head.
No,
That's
Aw.
not very wise.
Unless
Make
you're
it a
dressing up as a
plastic-
scarecrow.
it's supposed to be a plastic bag.
A plastic bag. Yeah. Have a new haunting. So
Sawed off at the neck, right?
I put these up to give everyone an example of what some of the baseline reading forms that we have, where you can put down the moon phase, solar phase. This is just kind of a general form. If anybody wants to print these off and use them for your team, go right ahead. EMF hotspots. If there's an appliance that's blowing up with EMF, you can make note of it and what the readings are. And then there's a debunking form too, but we're going to get into that in a little bit.
I forgot to ask. There was one question from chat earlier. I meant to ask. Aaron had asked, so do all teams have or even want a sensitive or medium? It seems more common than I thought.
No. I mean, if you're a science-based team, you're not going to have one. I would think, but it's
Hey, for us, we have, we do everything by experimental design. So if the experiment calls for it, we'll have it.
Yeah.
But if the experiment doesn't call for it, we're not going to have it. So that's how we operate. And if the experiment calls for hanging a dead chicken from the door, we'll hang a dead chicken from the door. But if the experiment doesn't call for that, we can't do that too often because Steve gets hungry. So,
So, and if you are going to have one, make sure they're a good one, because you don't want one going in, oh, I feel a heavy presence. Oh, there's a dark presence. Oh, there's a demon. Have a good one if you're going to have one.
Talking about the forms, we actually found a site. It's been years, and I just keep making copies. I don't know if y'all can see this or not, but you can actually get forms online that has all this information already on it. You just put your team's information, just like right here. And it's got all the same type of stuff that you're showing here, but it is available online.
If you find that link, if you just put it on the Ghost Dead page, that'd be great. Because
I'll have to look. It's been 4 or 5 years since we actually initially downloaded all this stuff.
Okay. So we've got everything ready now. It's investigation time. Linda, Heather, do you want to take this?
Sure. The investigation. Eliminate evidence, contamination possibilities, turn off ceiling fans, close blinds, curtains, check for dripping faucets, HVAC, running, listening for natural occurring noises of the location. All cell phones on airplane mode and car key fobs out of distance of equipment. Make sure any pets in the home are secure and away from the home is best.
Yes.
So,
Do you tell your clients when you go in, we're going to be closing your curtains and pulling your blinds and things like that?
we do.
Usually, yeah, we do.
if we go, if we go into a location, it's a home visit. We tell them everything we're going to do. The one thing though, about the cell phones on airplane mode is if we're not using the cell phone as part of the experiment, it stays off the property.
Yeah.
You got to get it out of there, because just about every piece of equipment you have is sensitive to the RF given off by the processor in that phone,
Mhm.
whether it's transmitting or not. If they are, the processor itself gives off RF, so it'll cause things to happen that you don't want to happen.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
And
And we also, you got to tell the client to do that too, because a lot of times a client will sit there and say, yeah, we turned it off, no problem. And they've really got it on in their pocket, and you see Facebook chime on it every once in a while. So yeah, you got to make sure the client does that too.
we request the team members leave it, if they can, feel safe leaving it locked in the car or, turned off completely. If they have to go check it, they can go check it. But
Another thing in terms of safety, and I'm always big on safety with my team, is if the whole team is going out there, let's just say normal residence cases, your entire team will not be going. You're going to have somewhere between 3 to maybe 6 people on your team going. If you've got another team member, make sure they know where you are, make sure they know the location, and they know that you will be checking in either periodically or at a set time. And that is more for a safety thing. There are locations that we've gone to where it was way out in the country and there is no cell reception. And you just want to make sure that you have somebody that's going to keep an eye, that, hey, he said that he was going to be done at 10 p.m. And it's now 1 a.m. and I haven't heard a thing. So make sure if you're going out to these places, somebody has on your team. My wife, for example, she always knows the address of where I'm going, when I'm going to be there, my expected time to depart. And if I am running late, I'll make sure I let her know, just so that nothing happens and you don't go missing.
Also, if your team members are going home after the investigation and you're going to many different locations miles away, always check in with somebody to let you know that you did get home safe.
Yes, we always say home, I'm home, I'm home. Yeah, I always do that.
Always.
Another thing about contamination possibilities is, I forget who said, quiet down and sit and listen to the house or the location. Just listen, let the house settle.
That's what I do.
Yeah, get that, and just listen for what the natural house noises are. So, I mean, my house cracks and pops like, I've got poltergeist, but it's just the house, I hope. But take a few minutes.
As soon as we get everything set up, we'll even step outside for about 10 to 15 minutes, let the house settle down. Then we'll come back inside and put 2 or 3 people in different sections of the house and just listen. And then we'll also do this periodically during the investigation. We've been in there for a couple hours, let everybody back out, let the house settle down for a little bit, dust or just any activity, and then start slowly going back in to see what happens.
Another thing, tin roofs are really popular again. Check to see if the house or location could have any tin outside, because we had a house that had a tin roof and it rained. All our audio was just completely ruined. I mean, we got nothing. It sounded like we were in a bullet storm. Anybody else have anything to add for this? We'll go on to the next one.
Next.
All right. How, Brad, you want to take that one?
Yeah, I can take this one. Like it says there, remember, you're not there to prove a location's haunted. It's one thing, in regards to that statement, if you read the second one, instead, you're there to collect data and evidence that may or may not support that the reported activity is paranormal. A lot of times what you're looking for is you're just looking for anomalies, things that don't normally happen. And that's all you can say that happens. If you can't, some states, you can't legally say you have a ghost or something like that, or your dead Uncle Fred's hanging out in the bathroom over there. Wait a minute, that's your live Uncle Fred. Anyway, you can't say things like that. And there have been so many people, like I talked about that other thing where they told that one fellow that had mental issues that he had a demon. He tried to kill himself. So we couldn't, you can't say things like that. And, and before you go into a location, you really need to think about, you can't just say, we're here to help you. How are you going to do that? You need to really think about that hard, because if you're just going there to detect anomalies and you tell the person, well, we got this weird reading over here, we got this weird picture over here, or we got this weird audio over here, that's one thing, but how does that help the person? So you really need to figure out how you're going to actually perform that help function.
Yeah, one of the questionnaire questions is, what do you expect out of this investigation?
Yeah, it's extremely important, because there are some people that are they're just curious. They just want to know. There are other folks that, okay, I need to get whatever is here out of this house. And that will help you identify how you're going to go about investigating. And like Brad said, you're not there to say this is haunted. You know what I mean? That should be the very last thing that you say, and that is at the client reveal. So when you are going in, you need to be very conscious and cognizant of what you are saying out loud. If you go into an EVP session, and I know we're going to get into it, but I can't tell you how many times people will ask it, in events, do you want us to leave? You know what I mean? Like, and and you hear somebody say, get out. Like, that doesn't make anybody at that home feel comfortable. You might be able to go home at the end of the night, but your client has to stay and sleep here and live there. And that you are essentially doing exactly what you are being brought in not to do. So make sure they're comfortable. Make sure the way that you're investigating is very cognizant. And you are there. You're there to collect data. You're not there to prove that it's haunted.
That's where, if you're going to have a sensitive or a medium on your team, make sure they're not one of the ones that walk in front of the client and say, it feels really dark and negative in here. I mean, you've just, yeah, just don't do that. Even if it's true, don't tell it to the client.
Enjoy your night after we leave.
Yeah, good luck. We're going to Waffle House. See you later.
Sleep tight.
Heather, you want to take this?
Yeah. The investigation should begin with the team trying to debunk or find any natural causes or explanations for the reported activity. And for this one, what we do is we actually take a list of all the reported activity and walk through the house trying to find the different things that could naturally be causing that before we actually investigate it as possibly being paranormal.
And so far, I mean, go so far as jumping up and down, trying to make a kitchen cabinet open. You're going to do all kinds of things to try to make it happen. So, I mean, I'm sure Brad's got some really good ones for this one, but I mean, this is part of, you're not there to say the house is haunted. You're there to try to figure out if there is an organic natural cause. There's a difference between the explainable and the unexplained. So try your best to debunk and go as far as you can to debunk something. I mean, we've had reports of, shadow figures in the house. We try to get there before it's too dark out to see if there's any shadows coming in from the trees, from a car going by. So, you've got to do a lot of work to try to figure out if something's really happening or not. Do you guys, what's the furthest you could go to debunk something?
Well,
Go ahead, Linda. I'm sorry.
I have a really good example. My husband's military, and I lived on Fort Sill. A lot of clients, they'll say something happened, and then they'll have friends or neighbors, oh my gosh, your house is haunted. I lived on Fort Sill. The officers' quarters we lived on was very close to the range where they shot the same kind of multiple launch missiles that they shot in Desert Storm.
Mm-hmm.
My dishes in my cabinets would rattle. I would leave. I'd come home. All my kitchen cabinets would be open. The door on the pendulum clock would be open. It was from the vibrations of the missiles. Now, if you don't look at that way, oh my gosh, my house is haunted. The cabinets keep opening. This old clock that I bought in an antique store, the door's always open.
It's possessed.
Yeah, you have to look at those things. And with our team, we're very fortunate to have a very wide base of people to tackle these projects. We've got a contractor. We've got 2 people in the medical profession when we're dealing with medications. We've got a chief of police who's really good with, the questioning and people skills. I'm an educator for 30 years. If children are involved, that's my forte. I will make friends with the child and get the child comfortable. So, we're very fortunate in that we do have a wide range of people on the team that can tackle each individual area, whether it be construction, wiring, or just the basic, listen to what's going around you, and the range is firing like crazy, and these things are happening.
Somebody had a question in chat. Or actually, Brad, before I ask that, did bring that question in. Brad, I know you wanted to add something.
Oh, I was gonna say something very similar to Linda. I mean, we're lucky. We got two structural engineers that work for us. You know, well, not work for us, but work with us. And we have folks that as with various skill sets in the construction industry and industrial management and things like that. So we have a very good feel for HVAC, plumbing, building structures, that kind of thing. So it's if you have access to people like that, that's really cool. Now, if you don't, there are ways in that you can, you know, basically when you sit and you listen to that house and you hear the natural noises in that house, that's going to be your first clue that something that you're dealing with is natural. So that, you know, you don't necessarily have to have those structural engineers, but it's nice when you do.
Is there a question?
Yep. So Brian in chat asks, what about sites that normally have phenomena during daylight hours?
Go during the day.
Yeah, I was actually going to touch on that later. Is you got to go when the activity is claimed to have happened. You can't, if the activity happens during the day, you don't want to investigate at night because they might not be getting anything. So basically go off of what your client tells you and time your investigation around where most of their claims happen.
I know a lot of popular shows and I mean, even we host paranormal events and we do it at night. Biggest reason is because the business is closed then. There's less traffic on the road. It's, you know, it's a downtime for the location. Like the tavern, for example, we have a restaurant and a theater there. And guess when they're not using the restaurant and theater? 11 o'clock at night. And so, you know, so we're investigating at night. That doesn't mean that you should just throw daytime investigation out the window. I've experienced some really phenomenal things during the day in some locations. And, you know, my very first kind of dip into the paranormal was taking a recorder out to a battlefield and got things there too. So don't let that stop you, especially if the client is not comfortable with nighttime investigations or for example, if they have children that have a routine and they are not able to be, you know, out of the house at that time, but they're experiencing activity all throughout the day and night, try the daytime.
Absolutely. I mean,
yeah. I mean, there's I mean, like, you know, like I was talking about in regards to experimental design, we've had several projects where, you know, it was the experiment takes place in the middle of the day. You know, and just like, you know, at Hanover Tavern, Steve, we had the equipment up there before it was even dark. You know, we put that equipment, let it run for several hours before you guys showed up. So, you know, that, you know, it doesn't really matter what time of the day it is, unless your experimental design calls for it to be at a certain time. You don't have to do that.
one of the questions we get all the time is, why do you always investigate at night? Well, usually we're off work at night. The clients are off. You know, there are logistic reasons we have. And Saturday nights, everybody's usually off on Sunday. We can sleep late because we have a paranormal hangover. The client can possibly be out of the house on Sunday and spend, you know, be away from the house on Saturday night. So, I mean, there are reasons why. It's not because of the activity. It only happens on Saturday night between 9 and 3 a.m. It's just happens to be usually when we can all get there.
As much as I'd like to investigate on the Monday afternoon, my boss would be very displeased.
That your wife, your boss, or
both?
Now, before we get into this next one thing that I want to touch on is if you have any smokers on your team, try not to smoke right beforehand, especially if it's a place that is known to have different smells attached to whatever may be going on in the house. That and no booze. Booze just makes it stupid.
Yeah, that gets into liability also.
Smoking, booze, drugs, none of that. No controlled substances.
That's afterwards. Just kidding. All right, with everybody in place, everybody's alert, everybody's had their Starbucks coffee, ready to go. That's when we go lights out. Now, this is something that I had read when putting this together. The team should first spend their time in the specific locations based on reported activity or hotspots. and my lights are flickering. That's good. Strong activity is localized. Maximize your time if that's possible. Thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, you don't want to
I mean,
spend you don't want to spend your first 2 or 3 hours in the bathroom when all the activities, all the kitchen cabinets opening up. You want to be exactly where they keep having it, so you can either prove or disprove whatever they've been reporting.
Absolutely.
But good luck doing that, because the vast majority of the time they'll tell you that all the cabinets open and shut in the kitchen, and you load the kitchen up for bear. You got 28 cameras in the kitchen, you know, and every data logger you got's in the kitchen. Then all of a sudden it's down the hall in the little girl's room. Her closet door opens and shuts a bunch of times, and you're like, hey, what's going on down there?
And you've got absolutely nothing down that hall.
Yeah.
That tends to happen.
Yep.
You know, it's pretty interesting how it's almost as if you know, something knows what you're trying to do. But the you know, we've accidentally caught one of the best video clips we've ever captured at an outdoor site here near Richmond, and it by pure accident, because we weren't looking for that. We put a cheap piece of junk camera out there, and lo and behold, it picked up one of the best video clips we've ever gotten. All the really cool 1080p cameras were elsewhere, all outside, everything. But that little POS camera was, you know, basically, it captured the best one. So you never know in that situation. It's nice to be able to, you know, do deductive reasoning and say, well, it should happen here. But a lot of times, you know, you're going to have to be mobile, or you know, or able to change your location on a moment's notice if you need to do that.
So if you think about it, like if this is a case of a possible intelligent haunting, what's a human spirit that was a thinking person, they're going to want to avoid these cameras probably. So the more you have out, the more equipment you have spread around the house, regardless of it only happens in the kitchen or only happens in the master bedroom, your chances are going to be better of capturing something. Because if you're dealing with a thinking, responding entity, they're not going to walk up into the camera and wave. I mean, it'd be great if they did, but so have equipment everywhere. That's my advice.
And I think, you know, this goes back to when you are first planning. You know, you've had your interview, and now you need to plan of what, based off of the activity reported, what equipment is going to be best utilized, right? And so, you know, I know as a paranormal investigator, we like to carry our entire arsenal with us. But keep in mind, when you're going into a home like this, you know, it's not one of those locations where people are consistently investigating. It's not a public site. Just think about it for a second from the perspective of you're sitting in your living room watching TV at 10 o'clock at night. You're tired. You're about to go to bed. And 10 people that you have no idea who they are just walked into your house with a boatload of equipment that you don't recognize or understand. And they start talking and asking you questions and interrogating you almost. So make sure when you are utilizing and deploying your equipment, don't go overboard. You know, use what you need, what makes sense, and kind of work it from there. If you go in there and you're throwing everything scattered through every room all over, and I mean, even like, you know, if you go in and you deploy all these DVRs and they're all pointed at a wall, you know what I mean? Like, make sure you're making a conscious effort with the equipment that you have, so that you get the most out of it without going nuts.
Yeah, the equipment thing I'm going to be talking about here when I in another couple of slides. But you know, it's nice to know what your equipment's going to give you. You know, what's it really telling you? You really need to know that, because a lot of people go out and they buy things off the shelf and they have no idea what the equipment's doing. They just know that there's a blinking light or something like that, and they've seen it on TV and it makes a cool noise. So, you know, that must tell us something, but they don't really know what that is. So it's really a good idea to know what your equipment's giving you before you actually use it. And once you know that, then you can actually make a better decision on what you need to bring with you.
And refer to our video from 2 weeks ago about equipment. That'll help you if you haven't seen it.
Josh in chat asked, when going lights out, do you turn off power at the breaker box to limit EMF readings going through the walls due to wiring, or just light switches and appliances and equipment?
Well, I mean, I don't want someone coming in the house and turning off my refrigerator and the ice maker and all my clocks and my oven, I mean, it would be ideal to eliminate all of that, but if you've got your DVRs running, they need to be connected to something. People's alarm systems are wired into electric. I mean, that's not a very easy thing to do.
Yeah, if you turn off power like that to an entire building, when you kick it back on, there could be other problems. You could overload a circuit. You could actually cause a refrigerator compressor to die on you. There's other things that can happen. There are a lot of ramifications for shutting off the equipment.
Yeah.
The power, sorry.
Well, plus getting back to safety, if all of a sudden you need a light on real quick and you shut everything off at the breaker, you're dead.
Yep. Investigation techniques. Who wants to take it? Let's start with these.
I'll go for it.
Okay.
Introduce yourselves to the spirits and explain your intentions. Explain and demonstrate equipment. Optional depending on team types, scientific or client-based. Excuse me. Develop and conduct experiments that relate to the reported activity and use corresponding equipment. Reenactments, role play, costumes, trigger objects, music can be used to elicit activity. EVP sessions, burst EVP sessions, spirit box sessions may also elicit responses. And periodically check environmental detection equipment and compare it to baseline readings.
So let's start with the top one, where we got into, like Steve said, explain why you're there and what the equipment that you have does. I'm a big proponent of that because you're dealing with a 100-year-old spirit. They're not going to know what a EDI is. And if you come bursting into my house and start demanding me to say this and do that and kick that, I'm going to go to my room and hide. So, you need to state your intentions and try to, if there is a spirit there, try to get some kind of trust built. I mean, if it's a negative spirit, you forget it. But what about the rest of you? Do you do this? Do you explain your equipment? Do you talk to the air?
And that's the hardest thing to get used to is talking to nobody, and introducing yourself to the wall, basically. But I always talk to the wall as if I've known them for a long time. I want, if there is a spirit in that room, I want them to be as comfortable with me as I'm going to be with them, and don't belittle them at all either. Just explain everything while you're there, and hopefully you will get some responses out of it.
On our side, we don't interact with we try not to interact with the environment. We try to interact with it as little as possible. So you won't really see us doing that kind of thing very often, not unless the experimental design calls for it.
I take the time to also, in addition to introducing myself to the spirits, just kind of let them know that if at any time throughout the investigation that they have a question about me, to feel free to ask, to try to, open it up to get them more comfortable to where they can learn about me as much as I want to learn about them.
That's a good point. And the next one is something Brad's going to get into in a little bit, so I'm just going to go past that one. But some of the other techniques, reenactments and role playing and costumes. I mean, if you're at a Civil War location, I know a lot of times people will dress in period costumes or reenact something that happened in that location. Do your teams do those things?
Yeah, and I think this is a very big thing, folks. And this is why it's, to me, extremely important to understand the history of a location, and understand, not only your client's history, but the home. So if you're living in if your client's living in an older home, and they've had, it's been passed down, maybe through a family, maybe it's been sold and there's been 1, 2, 3 plus owners, try to do as much digging as you can and see if you can identify who those previous owners were, see if there was anything that occurred in the house, as best to your ability that you can. If you start going even further back, you might find newspaper clippings. You can look at census data, that sort of stuff, to identify who was in these homes. And that will give you a really good idea of when you're, if you're going to try to reenact, if you're going to try to role play. For example, if you dress in a Civil War garb, but you're getting activity from American Revolution, you are completely missing it. You're not going to get anything, and they're going to look at you the same way as if you walked in just wearing your regular Nike t-shirt like an alien. So make sure you do your history, understand what you're going into. Music. I've played Native American drums, and I've gotten a lot of activity. And then I played Johnny Cash and gotten a lot of activity. But it was very dependent on the location, knowing the history of that spot.
Steve, you mentioned John Sable before, and one of the coolest things that I have ever seen was when John Sable, he's an archaeologist and a former actor, and he has a theory that if you perform, basically it's performance archaeology is what he calls it. You perform skits based on different layers of time at a location, and you might just hit on something. And he was, we were not sure about this, and he actually performed this at a location we were at. And a lot of times you get like activity that's in bursts of 1 or 2 seconds, like a voice that's 1 or 2 seconds. This was audible voices for 10 minutes because of what he did. And that was the coolest thing I think I have ever seen in this field. It was shocking almost. So I'm a big proponent of that theory right now, and we're hoping to run more experiments around that kind of thing. John's the expert at it, and if you guys ever want to look him up, his last name is Sabol, and then John is John. His theories are very interesting, to say the least.
Yeah, I love using music and sound effects. Like we were investigating a house that was smack dab on the battlefield, and they had the rifle trenches in their backyard, and we played on the loudspeaker battle sounds, gunfire, cannon shooting, people screaming, and it got things revved up. It was quite fascinating. And also, if you're doing any Civil War stuff, taps is a good trigger music to play. And make sure your trigger objects are appropriate for the place you're investigating. I mean, you don't want to take a Boo Bear into, a house that's never had kids in it. I mean, that's kind of useless. So make sure what you're using is appropriate for where you are and what you're doing.
I've only had the opportunity to dress in costume once, and that was at the Birdcage in Tombstone. And it was the most uncomfortable I've ever been, because I was in full duster, long sleeve shirt, long pants, and I was sweating up a storm. One of my other investigators also dressed up as a call girl. Of course, that the Birdcage is known for that type of activity, and we even had a shootout downstairs in the private poker room. And it did get a little activity after that, but not as much as we had hoped. But it was a shot.
Yeah, you got to experiment. I mean, you never know what's going to work until it works. And like Linda said, you want to periodically check your equipment to look for changes. That's, you just don't set it and don't check it again. You need to make sure the batteries didn't die, for one thing. Anybody else have anything to add before I skip over?
Let the client know you're doing all of this. So don't show up in Civil War gear. Make sure they know what's going on. Normally, going down some of these steps, this is going to be like a second investigation or something for us. It's not like we're showing up and we're getting into, our garb or anything like that. The first time that we investigate, we tend to kind of focus on, introducing ourselves, trying to build a rapport with the spirits, as well as the client. building that bridge of trust, and seeing what we get. I know we're going to dive into it, but burst sessions, EVP sessions, and then the second time, or even later that evening, trying to focus on those certain things. So if we know that this line of questioning is working, then maybe we'll dive into it. But make sure, before you start doing anything crazy, that you let the client know, so that they're aware.
As we have had clients that have, they've of course seen the television shows and said they did not want a spirit box used in their house, that they were afraid that it would manifest something. So we didn't use spirit boxes. And Ouija boards are popular. If you are one of those teams that want to pull out a Ouija board, ask your client first, because they may object profusely to it. And then you'll have a lot of problems on your hand if they find out later that you were using a Ouija board in their house. All right, now this is something that people kind of forget to do, but do wellness checks on team members throughout the investigation. See how they're feeling, check for headaches, just mental awareness to see if anything's affecting them. You just never know what's going to happen to somebody at an investigation. They could just be physically sick for some other reason, but you want to keep an eye on everybody. And if everyone's in the dark, you may not always be aware of what's going on with them. So keep checks on your teammates. Check stationary cameras periodically for maintenance. If no one's standing there staring at the DVR screen, keep an eye on your cameras, because something could come unplugged or turn fuzzy, or a wire could get messed up, and then all your video is ruined. So keep an eye on your equipment. That's a big thing. I use some cameras that take SD cards, and I have to check them periodically to make sure the card doesn't fill up, because sometimes one will fill up faster than the other one, and you just want to make sure you're always covered.
On the DVR side of things that you were talking about, we know it's when we're actually at the site, instead of leaving the equipment there over a 12-hour period, if we're actually there at the site monitoring the equipment live, what we do is we make sure we're monitoring that video screen the entire time somebody is, and we have a surveillance log that we keep, where we're constantly writing down things that we see that might be anomalous. And then also we usually have a microphone running live from inside the place we're monitoring remotely. Mm-hmm. And at that point, we're also marking off anomalies in that on the audio too. So it's a lot easier to go back and look at the other data you've collected and make correlations and stuff like that. But also you can tell if something really cool happens, you can try to get in there, or if something falls over and breaks, or one of your cameras goes out or something like that, you can tell that too. So. Yeah.
And this stuff that we use is not inexpensive, so I want to keep an eye on it. Now, this is something that I really like to do, and my team does, but we like to have the clients, after we've done the walkthrough, signed all the appropriate forms, everything's good, is to have everyone leave the house that lives there and investigate without anyone in the house. There's things we may want to discuss about the client that we would rather not say in front of the client. That gives you a lot of opportunities just to see if things are different from the client there and not there. And then the second half, we'll text whenever we decide we may want to take a break and step out for air. We'll text them and say, please come back to the house, and then we'll kind of do everything over again with the client. We'll have them do EVPs, have them ask questions. We have a list I posted on our site, I think 14 standard questions that we've asked, and we'll have them repeat the same questions. So this is something that we like to do. What do the rest of you? This is something we discuss in the interviews. Like, we would like you to leave if all possible. You guys do that?
We do.
Well, we usually they're gone the whole time. But just remember too that if you're there, if they leave and your headquarters happens to be outside where you're monitoring audio, and you got to make sure they're not within earshot of those speakers. Just make sure you don't do that.
Well,
Yeah.
Do y'all invite them
Important
back?
safety tip.
Do y'all invite them back in if the activity seems to be centered around one person? Because that's what we do.
We would if that was the case, but we haven't actually, we don't do a lot of home visits. Let me put it that way, because of the nature of how we operate. But when we have, if we have taken the person in there, it's only for a short period of time. Like for one excursion, an excursion for us is like 20 minutes. So that's typically how we do that.
Now, we like to see if any of the energy or activity changes with the presence of the people that live there. If they're eliciting the activity or not. It's just like we'd like to see if there's any difference to compare it to.
And the way that we operate that is very similar, where for us, it entirely depends on the interview and what you find during that interview. So if we find that out of the family of 4, there's only one person that's experiencing things in the house, that kind of gives us a little bit more, I guess, of an eye towards that one individual. And maybe that activity is centered around that person. If it's 2 or the whole family, we'll try to do something where if we can have the family leave for a couple of hours, we ask that, and then like Cliff said, bringing them back in so that we can see it, if there's a difference, if it is centered more towards the family, towards specific people, those sorts of things.
This is something that you go over in the interview questions. Who's experiencing the activity? Are other family members experiencing it? You go through and you try to pinpoint, like we had a case where the children were all experiencing it and the mother never, nothing. So, you want to go through all this in the interview process and try to get as much information as you can.
We had a case recently where in the initial phone interview and in the forms, all the evidence seemed to revolve around the male in the home. And then when we had the actual in-person interview, he was present, but she wouldn't let him speak at all. Every time he started to speak, she would like interject her take on it, her opinions. So in that case, we did ask them all to leave except him. And we kept him with us. And then at that point, he was able to freely speak, tell us what he was feeling without any interference. And we actually did witness a lot of really interesting things occurring around this gentleman, to the point where he left and was physically ill outside the building. But he couldn't get a word in edgewise during the personal interview because the female was very strong and she just would talk right over him. And we made a command decision to just focus on him and send the rest of them away.
And what Linda just said is extremely important. And I think it's something that we probably forgot to mention when doing those initial interviews. If you can, separate the clients. If it is 2 people, 3 people living in this house, do what you can to separate them and perform one-on-one interviews, kind of a solo interview where you don't have the 2 or 3 people sitting in the same spot, because stories change, and like Linda said, somebody's going to interject, or somebody might be like, oh, and then I saw this picture fly across the room, and then somebody will like, oh no, actually it kind of just fell, and somebody else will be like, well, I was in the room and none of that happened. It's important to kind of like get all 3 of those so you can compare and contrast some of those stories and get a full picture, because you don't want the client, one of the clients speaking on behalf of someone else. It's always better to kind of get that information from the horse's mouth if you can, straight from that individual.
Yeah, trust me, we tried. She wasn't having any of the separation business. So.
Now, children is a different story. I mean, that would be very, very touchy situation to interview children individually. So you'd have to make.
Yeah, I think you probably want to leave it towards like the parents, adults, that sort of thing.
If we do interview a child, we always have one of the parents present.
Absolutely.
Always.
And moving on. And this one, I'm going to let Brad take away.
Well, thanks, Philip. Appreciate it. Yeah, the scientific process. A lot of people think that they really understand what this process is, and you'd be surprised how many people really don't understand the process. We're an academic organization whose sole purpose is to do research. That's what we're for. We're made up of professors, scientists, current and former police officers, medical professionals, engineers. We've got the whole gamut of people that do nothing but the research because of their various skill sets. And pretty much this is how we operate regarding almost everything we do. All right. First off, if we've been contacted about, let's say somebody's thinks they have a ghost or something like that, based on the interview and the form data we get and that kind of stuff, we generate a hypothesis based on, prior theory or reports or patterns and that kind of stuff. We'll actually generate that hypothesis, which is basically a theory about what's going on. All right. Then we design experiments to gather the appropriate data, including any instrumentation, if any, that we might need. We might not need any instrumentation. We might just need our eyes and a recorder or something like that. But we were very careful about designing that experiment to actually gather data around the hypothesis we've made regarding what they think they're seeing or hearing. And then after that, we'll perform those experiments and we'll gather up all that data and evidence. But what's really interesting is we collect that data into a database, and all the audio, the video, pictures, data logger data, all that stuff goes into a database. And then we also have a text database that essentially goes through every project we've ever done, and we can look for keyword correlations, that kind of stuff. And we do, after we've collected all that data, we perform the analysis on that data, and we take a lot of time to do that. In regards to if you're just doing this for the first time, or maybe you're relatively new at it, your data analysis can be as simple as looking for variations in temperature, looking for variations in barometric pressure, looking for an anomaly on a recorder or on video or something like that. We use an analysis package called R to do a lot of our heavy lifting, and that helps us out a lot. But you don't have to do that. You're looking for differences. You're looking for what they call anomalous data points, and that's what you're looking for. And then we'll report it. We'll report out on what we find, and we repeat the process. That's the part everybody forgets. When you're following the scientific method and experimental design process, you've got to be able to repeat it, because if you can't repeat it, it doesn't mean anything in the eyes of academia. So you got to be able to repeat it. In other words, like, Steve mentioned going to a place more than once, you might want to consider that you really might need to do that, because you might need to repeat some data, or you may have found out that you're totally off base and you need to try a different experiment. So that right there is why you might want to go more than once. And you can use this in any scenario, including home visits. We've been called, we've been contacted, and people say, yeah, I think I've got a demon in my closet because I hear a scratching on that door every night. And then we conduct it, we figure out, it's like, okay, the hypothesis might be that there's something that's physically manifesting inside the closet. So we get a vibration, we'll get a vibration, or actually a block of vibration sensors. We'll look for changes in the geomagnetic field, because as a person crosses over a geomagnetic field location, it causes variations in the geomagnetic field. We'll do things like that. And also we'll do a structural look at the house. And lo and behold, that on that particular case, we found out there was a raccoon going into crawl space, coming up in that closet and scratching on the door. So, the experimental design process allowed us to be able to look at all that stuff. So that's how we operate. And it also allows us to go ahead and look at all the data across multiple cases too, or multiple projects, research projects. And that way we can draw these really big conclusions. So, but anybody have any questions on the panel about that?
I want to come work with you sometime.
There's a whole lot of sitting and waiting.
That's a story of my life, sitting and waiting.
Steve knows that.
We had a case too of somebody, she was, the scratching, and we found a whole nest of mice, so it wasn't a demon. She said, I'd rather have a ghost than have mice in my dormers. Any questions coming in on stream for right now before we move on?
Not right now. We can move on.
All right.
Bueller. Oh, sorry.
So now we've done our thing. It's time to end the investigation. Linda, you want to take it?
Sure.
Somebody?
Termination of investigation. The lead investigator should determine when to call an end of the investigation and inform team members. Equipment breakdown, disassemble, inventory, and carefully pack all equipment. Final walkthrough. Ensure no items or equipment have been left behind. Any of the client's property that was moved to accommodate the investigation should be put back in place. Use still photos taken at the beginning of the investigation if needed. Take all trash generated by the team with you.
Yes. So who has left a piece of equipment at an investigation? Raise your hand. Yeah, we've all done it. I had to drive back on a Sunday one time for an hour and a half to get a very expensive piece of equipment. So the inventory is very important. If it's 3, 4 in the morning and you're exhausted and you're ready to get out of there, you haven't had squat happen all night long, you're going to get sloppy and lazy. So an inventory list of what you use that night comes in really handy, or you'll end up driving a long way back the next day to pick up something. So that's something I personally suggest.
Try leaving a battery pack in the middle of a cemetery at 4 a.m.
Oh,
and then realizing it and then having to go back before somebody else walks away with it.
yeah, better. And label your equipment too. Always have your name on the equipment.
Yeah, labeling is important, especially when you've got, a whole team and everybody has mel meters or something like that, or you all run the same, audio recorder. You want to know who's who, or who's is going home with who. A thing that I do for my equipment, I have 2 cases that I use. I actually, I know a lot of people do it. I got gun cases. I went to like Bass Pro, for example, here, and I picked up 2 cases, and I, broke out the little pieces of foam so that I can have each piece of my equipment in one slot. And so for me, I don't bring anything that doesn't have, it's not in a case in the foam slots. That way I know at the end of the night, when I close that case, if there is something not in there, if there is a hole where there should be a piece of equipment, I know that I have left something behind.
Yeah, there's one thing that we do, because when we go to a location, a lot of times we're putting out probably close to anywhere from 25 to 30 pieces of equipment, besides the cameras and the recorders. So when we do that, we actually send somebody around to every piece of equipment, identify whose it is, where it's located. The cool thing is we'll sometimes, especially if it's on a big piece of outside property like Bacon's Castle or a Tecahoe plantation or something like that, if we're doing something outside there and there's a big space of acres that we're dealing with, we do GPS marking. And that you can just do that with your cell phone here, that kind of stuff. It's really easy to do. So we'll do that, and we'll keep that in a log. Sometimes it's an electronic log. Sometimes it's just a piece of paper on a clipboard.
If you're doing any of the public investigations where people are buying tickets and going, and if you're taking your own equipment, make sure it is heavily marked with your name or something on it. Use nail polish, bright day glow, because people do have sticky fingers. And if your name's splattered on something in, neon pink nail polish, they probably may not pick it up.
Another simple way of doing that is if you have a Dremel at home, you can Dremel, your initials or something into it. That way, if, somebody snags something, it's a little bit harder to alter, something that's kind of etched in to the device or the plastic. Obviously, don't do that to a camera, please. But, if it's like a a K2 or something like that, you have a little bit of, within that plastic, you could probably etch something in there just to make it a little bit more tamper proof.
Now, this may not work for someone who's got a whole lot of equipment like Brad. But if you don't have a whole lot, what we've done is that we've created a general spreadsheet of all of our equipment, and it's got a to and a from box to check it all off. But we will go in and delete the equipment that we're not going to take on this certain investigation. If you don't need everything, there's no need to put everything on the list. And that way you check it going in the boxes, going in the vehicles, and then when you return, same thing.
That's organized. I like that. That's down my OCD alley.
That's me.
Now, when it comes to putting things back in place at the client's house, this is where you want to like pull the curtains back that you closed, put the pillows back. If you set things on the sofa, if you made yourself at home, you can pull your photos out that you took in the very beginning and look and make sure everything's back in place, because you do not want to leave a client's house a mess. And then that's going to give you a bad reputation once they start talking about how horribly you left their house. Anybody else have anything to add on this?
Just be respectful. If you bring in a soda, if you bring in a snack or something, that trash needs to find its way to the trash can or back into your car. You need to be very respectful of going into these locations. In fact, when we go into these, especially clients, we leave our food and drink in the car. We don't bring any of that inside. That way we don't have anybody tampering with any of it. And we also don't have any concern that it is being left anywhere.
My wife is co-founder of our team, and she was a ex-Girl Scout leader. And her rule is leave the place cleaner than it was when you found it.
Good.
So I've got her over my shoulder all the time, making sure we clean up.
Cliff, you want to take it?
Sure. The lead investigator should advise the client when the investigation is complete, inform the client of when to expect a final report. If the client is absent when the team leaves, make sure the property is secure.
Yes, we have had clients that have left and just said, pull the door, turn the lock, pull the door shut when you leave. And, we love that actually. But what about, is there anything different you guys do when you finish an investigation? Have any rituals?
Say a little prayer.
Go ahead.
No, just say a little prayer when we're over with. Make sure everything stays there. If there was anything there, it doesn't follow you home.
And I would just say that if you tell a client a time frame that you're going to report back to them, if something comes up where you haven't gotten to review everything and it's going to be longer than expected, get back to them and let them know. Just do not leave them hanging, wondering, where are these people? What did they find? They should never have to contact you back for the results. That investigator should be keeping them, up to date. Hey, I'm sorry, we've had a death in the family or something, and we just didn't get to it this week, but we will get to it, and I will, get back with you as soon as I can. But if you give them a time frame, stick to it or contact them.
Yeah, always keep in contact and constant communication with the client. You need to build that level of respect and build that trust. If you're telling them one thing and you're not following back up, you say, oh yeah, we'll have this all reviewed in a week, and it's a month. I mean, look at it this way. They're contacting you for a reason. It's not for fun. This is not for fun. You are going out there to try to assist somebody, and you need to be aware of that. And, I'm not saying like you need to take off, from work for a week. You need to set the expectation with the client. Hey, I've got a job. I've got a day job. But you need to do your due diligence. And that means, maybe you don't go home and play video games or something, whatever it is you do when you get home. Dive into audio, video review, and set pace, especially with your entire team, so that you don't go back to the client and you've got, okay, here's 4 out of 5, investigators' data. We got nothing. And then the 5th person comes in and it's just like, a gold mine. And you're misinforming the client then. So make sure you keep that level of communication up. Let them know you're leaving. Don't just kind of like ghost them, essentially. Haha. Don't just disappear. You get it? You get it?
We see what you did there.
You know,
folks.
And
don't just disappear.
Another
He's gonna be
important
here all night.
Try the veal.
I'm usually the person that is talking to them, setting up the phone calls, doing the interview, talking to them throughout the investigation. I'm the one that's building the level of trust. So we made a very important point a little bit earlier. We all go home to the comfort of our homes and our beds, but they have to stay there. And it is a given fact that if there's anything there, sometimes we do ramp it up. And so I always make that next day phone call. You know, how was your evening? How did the rest of the night go? Did you guys rest well? Did anything happen I need to know about? Just check in with them. And then a couple days later, I repeat the process just to make sure that everything is okay, or maybe they're going through hell now because it's all ramped up. So
Yeah, and I even take that a little bit further. I repeat the process even after we do the final report with the client. I'll follow up a week later, and then every couple months, I'll just send them a text message or a call to say, hey, how's it going? Has anything changed? Do you still need our help?
And we say, once we leave your house, you're still our client. We're always here for you. Call us, email us. You know, when we hand you that report, that's not the end of it. We're always there for you. So it's a relationship at that point. I mean, you've investigated their home, you've invaded their most personal spaces. So, you know, sometimes you have to go back a year later or 2 or 3 times. I mean, you know, and if you've got that trust and that relationship, they're not going to hesitate to call you when something's going on.
exactly.
And you want that.
Another big thing is when you're leaving, you know, like you had asked, Philip, do whatever you personally need to do to make sure you sever that connection to the location, to any of the spirits there, if it is, you know, an active location. I will tell you the biggest no-no I have ever seen on an investigation. I was asked to come and assist another team with an investigation. And one of the individuals on the other team at this location said to the spirits in general that whatever was there, you know, the client didn't want them there. And hey, you can go anywhere in the world that you want. So you should leave the home. In fact, if you want to come to my house with me, just do that.
No.
Please never do that. Okay. I'm not saying, you know, if there's something negative there, just leave it for the client, but don't open up the possibility for something to follow you home. I know that we are there to assist the client. Let's say the client wants that haunting to be removed. That doesn't mean that you need to turn it into your own. So don't do that. Make sure you sever that connection, whatever it is. You know, I always say when I get in my car that, you know, nothing can follow me from this location. You know, I appreciate communicating with you, but I will talk to you next time I'm here. And then we all kind of have our own personal little things that you do. I know some folks on my team like to go and ground themselves. They like to spend a few minutes outside afterwards. Personally, I always like to take a shower when I get home. To me, it's kind of like a symbolic thing, like I'm done with the day, I'm done with this interaction. I kind of clean myself. It kind of gets me, you know, a little bit less, I guess, amped up from the investigation, clear my head, gives me some time before I can go and crash and go to bed. But that's my way of doing it. And I've had no issues bringing anything home with me. I don't, you know, you don't want to bring stragglers. So they're not going to pay rent. So don't do it. Don't open your doors.
I take it a step further. I do it at the location, but then before I ever put my hand on my front doorknob, I say out loud in front of my door, this is my home, this is my sanctuary. You are not allowed to come in here with me. You may not. Just, you know, that's just a double whammy for me. I always say it. I have an autistic child at home. He would freak if something followed me home and something happened. And that's always a concern for me. So I make sure that I say that out loud in front of my home too. You are not allowed. This is my private sanctuary. You don't have permission to enter here.
I say that before I even get in my car also driving home. Because I don't like to take an unwanted passenger. Evidence review. Who wants to take it? Heather, how about you?
Yeah, I can do it. During this time, all raw data, including video, audio, and recording, should be reviewed in a timely manner. Team members are responsible for reviewing their own data. Any possible evidence should be forwarded to the lead investigator and/or case manager. As a group, the team members should discuss the case, including their personal experiences, all collected evidence, and data.
So how does everyone deal with team members? Do they review their own? Do they send? How does it work for each of your team?
Well, we have a central data repository that where everybody can get to it. You know, basically it's a 2 terabyte Dropbox. But but what we do have, the people that have the instruments that collected the data actually do sit down and review it themselves. So, but if anybody else wants to get in there and do it, they can. The thing you mentioned at the bottom there, as a group, the team members should discuss the case, including personal experiences and collected evidence and data. The one thing that we try to do is that text-based database that we have for all of our research projects, any of that stuff goes in there. And that's a collaboration space where people can actually look at that stuff and make comments and things like that. So that's what that's for. And that way we can cross-reference those personal experiences and stuff like that over time, like years. Like I've been doing this for over 10 years now. And I can go back 10 years and pull data and stuff that I did 10 years ago, and including all the text references and the personal experiences and that kind of stuff. So that's real important. Don't just talk about it and then it goes away, you know, because your collective memory isn't going to last. Trust me. I'm 55 years old and I can't remember what I walked into this room for, except for the fact I've got a computer screen in front of me. So, you know, that right there is so important. You got to record that, and it needs to be somewhere where it can be cross-referenced with other things.
And also the reason to discuss together things that you pulled from your data that you collected on your equipment is something may be debunked by another team member. Something that one person thinks may be an EVP. It's like, oh, I think we were whispering in the background. You know, that's why you should discuss all these things once you've collected what you think is evidence. That's my thinking in it.
We actually had that happen.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, we had a big one. It was one where somebody was claiming that the audio was a Spanish-speaking person in the middle of Front Royal, Virginia, was saying some stuff in Spanish. And, you know, and I was like, now, wait a minute, that didn't sound like Spanish to me. And then, you know, because we were all looking at each other's stuff and making comments, because you can do that in collaboration space. And then it turns out that it was a guy sitting at headquarters yelling out that it sure is loud down here. And how they got Spanish out of that, I have no idea, but it was really loud and obvious. So that's kind of, yeah, we've run into that before.
Anybody have anything to add on that one?
We have a place that's like a private closed group page where, you know, if somebody gets something, they'll clip it and put it on there and then shoot us a text. Hey guys, look at this. They never tell us what they think they're hearing. It's just like, review this with me and give me your feedback on this. So anything we get, we drop there, and then we can communicate about it, listen to whatever they've got and offer opinions. And then I download that to an SD card, mark it for that particular case, and keep it on file.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the one thing you don't want to do if you've got what you believe to be as an EVP, don't share it with your team and go, hey, listen for the words, get out of here.
Right.
Because if you say that, that's exactly what they're going to hear. Let
Yeah.
them hear it first, and then you can collaborate to see what you've actually got.
Yeah, we just
And
kind of
vocal
say, I got
interpretation.
this. What is, I think I have something. You guys listen to it. Tell me what you think. That,
Yeah.
nothing leading.
It goes back to the
Yeah,
rock.
well,
Goes back to the rock and roll of the 80s when they were saying, listen to this rock and roll record backwards and you're going to hear something, and you listen to it 50 times and no, I don't
Hear
hear it.
something.
Well, listen for this.
all
Oh
is
yeah.
dead.
Oh, that's
All is
clear.
dead.
It's clear as a bell. Yeah.
Yeah, we don't try to identify the words. We classify it as a vocalization or some other anomalous noise. Or we just do not try to look for the words, because vocal interpretation is an art. It's not a science. And it's the interpretation. Steve can interpret it one way, I'll interpret it another, Phil will interpret another, Cliff will do another. It's like we're all going to hear something different. And it's based on the preconceived biases in our own brain that we'll never get rid of. So there's an actual study going on in Suffolk, England, about this very thing. And they're looking at trying to come up with an algorithm that can actually identify words based on vocalizations that's better than what we currently have, because everybody knows that the software that we currently have that looks for vocalizations gets it wrong a lot. And so they're trying to fix that. But it's like right now, the human brain has too many biases, and there's no way that we can really 100% say that word is that word.
Brad, let me ask you a question. Have you ever gotten an EVP that was so perfectly clear and understandable that everybody came to the consensus immediately that that's what you thought you heard?
No. The thing that we ran into, whenever something like that happened, it turned out it was another team member. And it wasn't really EVP. And another thing that we're finding too is that the data seems to point to the fact that the EVPs aren't really EVPs. They're really audible. It's just that we either didn't recognize them at the time, or they're just out of range of our human ear, and the microphone sensitivity was a lot more sensitive. So we are running into that. And but the EVPs, like I said, it doesn't do us any good to try to talk about the words, because it doesn't matter for our experiments. We just need to know something happened right there. So that's why we're doing that.
And also with all the forms that you had your clients sign, scan those and keep copies in your computer, and keep the paper original copies. But you definitely want to keep copies in case you lose something.
Yep. Yeah. Scan everything in. If you took any notes while there, like I know Brad alluded to earlier, where they write down on pen and paper, either scan those in, have somebody enter them, or even better, both. And keep all of that data. I've got a 2 terabyte drive at my house where anybody on my team, when we go to a client case or even a public case, they'll send me everything after they've reviewed their own data. They'll send me everything. And I keep that on file. Now, you do need to be conscious of the space. So, if you need to compress it, if you need to put it on a disk or something like that and file it away, do that. But keep everything that you can, just in case you do need to go back. You have things to look back on. When you signed non-disclosure agreements or release forms, when they expire. Those sorts of things. You want to make sure you stay on top of all of that and keep all of it.
And something
all those scanned documents end up in the collaboration space I was talking about. I didn't want to make you think that we write the stuff down on paper and just leave it. No, all that stuff goes into the collective data that we have in that collaboration space.
Mm-hmm.
Final report. All evidence, important collected data should be compiled. That's pulling out the bits and pieces that you think are important, not all 5 hours of your DVR film. You want what's important collected, including audio, video, any relevant information, conclusions, compiled into a comprehensive report by the team, excuse me, leader or case manager and presented to the client. We have a written report. We'd like to do reveal in person so we can discuss the things. How does everyone's team do it? Do you do it differently? Do you do it in person? Do you just send them the report through the email? A lot of people do it differently.
We like to do it in person.
Mhm.
We do it in person.
Well, we like to do things like that in person, but sometimes it's not practical. So, like, especially like right now, if you go into somebody's house, you're flirting with disaster. So, in that situation, we email the stuff or we provide them access to a public folder that we created in our collaboration space where they can see a report, see the data, see the results, that kind of stuff. And then we can talk to them over the phone while they look at it. And we've done it that way, or we've done it via like things like Zoom or AnyMeeting or WebEx or something like that, and we've done a multitude of ways, but it all depends on what the best fit is with who you're trying to present it to.
Yeah, usually we do it in person as well when we can, but then we also leave the client with a thumb drive that includes the case report, again, all of the waivers that were signed along the way, and then any clips of evidence that we captured.
You present a client with possible EVPs. Do you say, listen to this and tell me what you hear? How do you review EVPs with a client?
Yeah, we don't tell them what we heard. We just basically say, here's something we think we heard something, and we kind of let them tell us what they hear based on their experiences in the home and their preconceived biases that they have against it to see what they come up with.
Yeah, we don't fall into that trap because we're just saying, hey, we got an anomalous voice here. We don't know what it says, that kind of stuff. So we try at that, based on, because that's the way we do it. We don't fall into that traps where they might think it might say something else than what we think it says.
Anybody else? Anything to add? Any questions?
If it's a building that has, well, we did a restaurant one time that was built in 1902, was ripped apart by a tornado and rebuilt in 1912. And there was lots of rumors of who died in the house. There was a rumor of a suicide in front of the house. We did a full historical research on the house, and we gave them about a 1-inch thick binder full of actual historical facts surrounding the house, along with what we found.
Mm-hmm.
I think the biggest thing is just review with the client, whether it's by phone, whether it's by video, email. I mean, try to, if you can, in person's always best. Like Brad said, right now, when we've reviewed things with clients, it's been over the phone or over like Skype. It really depends on the technical know-how of the client and the location. But don't just send them, here's this stuff. This is what we think it's saying. Have a good day. That's definitely not helping anybody. You haven't accomplished anything. So, walk them through your findings, walk them through what that data means. Don't set bias, same thing like Brad said, when you go and review it as a team, oh, I think this says get out, well, now guess what? Everybody's thinking that. Let them come to their own conclusions. I really like, Cliff, what you do with the history. We do that too. And that's always so helpful. And the client appreciates it because they have something tangible that they can look at. And they probably learned something about their home that they otherwise didn't, or the location or the land, whatever.
Yeah.
But, help them, walk them through that.
The environmental data we collect too, we give them all that.
Yeah.
And there have been several sites that have used all that environmental data to find out, it's like, hey, I got a moisture problem here, or I've got a radon problem. Steve knows what I'm talking about there. And there's that kind of stuff crops up in that environmental data, and they love you for it. Even if you don't find any kind of paranormal activity, they love you for the fact that you just told them they got radon in their basement, or they hate you for that. But also we had another location. They had a serious white mold problem, and they didn't realize it until we took air samples in the place. So, It's like that kind of data too. They love that kind of thing. It's all ancillary to the investigation itself, but they still like it.
Oh, sure. And it shows you were thorough and that you were invested in what you were doing and cared about them also.
Right.
So we're not going to really get into, all right, can you get rid of whatever's in my house? Because we'd be here all night. And every team has a different way of going about, when the client says, can you cleanse my house? Can you get rid of this? So we'll just skip that one for tonight and do that another night. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's something I don't do. So
Yeah. And we could all be going back.
Nor I.
We do have one more question in chat.
Yep.
This could lend to a very lengthy discussion. So, keep that in mind. Josh asks, what do you think needs to happen for paranormal science to be recognized as a true science field?
Oh, I've got one part of the answer, but I'm sure Brad's got some.
I mean, it's pretty simple. You have to approach it as they would. You have to approach it. If you're going to try to be recognized by academia, you got to act like academia. And if you don't, they're going to ignore you. And, document. You write up papers, get papers published, that kind of stuff. That's when you're recognized. And if you don't do any of that, see, right now we've got 3 papers out there, and they're getting read by various people. One of them is written by one of our members who's a sociologist, and it's really he did a study on paranormal investigators. And when he first joined the group, we were joking around saying he's studying us. That's what he's doing. He's studying us. We were joking around. Well, it turns out that's what he was doing. And he actually wrote it up and got it submitted, and I think it's on academia.edu. But you write those papers and you start referencing those papers, you get recognized by people that in academia. And we have some inroads with the University of Virginia. We have some inroads with Johns Hopkins. We have inroads with the Ryan Institute, that kind of stuff. And these are academic professionals that do this kind of hardcore research all the time. So that's kind of what it takes. If you don't do that and you don't follow the scientific process as I laid it out there, they're not even going to look at you.
To me, what are we trying to prove? We're trying to prove that the continuation of life after death. What is a consciousness? A consciousness, scientists have not been able to make it concrete or tangible. So how can we collect evidence on something that hasn't been proven to exist yet? That's the big thing to me, where the science won't take us seriously until we can prove what consciousness is and our personalities and our individual spirit. How can we prove that life after death exists? Which is what we're going into people's homes to try to find out. Is my house haunted with the spirit of a person? So science will never take us seriously until we can say, well, there is life after death, because we have to be able to trace it, repeat it, and make it happen again for it to be scientific. It's, what I'm trying to say. Has to be,
yeah.
You have to be able to repeat it. And we can't do that with the human consciousness now. So science will never say, yes, ghosts exist, until they're able to create a consciousness. And that's the way I feel about it.
Well, we're not looking for that. And we're basically looking at people see and hear things, and we're trying to figure out what they're seeing and hearing. That's it. And if you start small like that and you can prove those little pieces and they build on each other, that's the scientific process. As they build on each other, it will eventually get to the point where it'll be whatever the real reason is, it'll be irrefutable. And if it is life after death, it'll be irrefutable. But you got to build it. It's a building process, and it's continuous, evergreen process. You just have to keep doing it over and over and over again. That's what the Warrens did. That's what the I can't remember the guy's name down at the Ryan Institute, but that's what he was known for.
Huh?
Yeah. I mean, they,
Right.
all these people, and the people from ASSAP, that's what they do. So that's why it's very important to approach it like that. If you reach out there and say, we're going to try and prove ghosts exist, that's really lofty. That's huge. And you're probably never going to see that in your lifetime. But you can start small and build it to the point where you're almost there. And then people will start piling on, and you'll start seeing people doing tangential research on what you're doing. And it all ends up building. I mean, that's how we got things like the International Space Station. That's how we got, that's how we got Kool-Aid, for goodness sakes. That's how, I mean, it's all because of those small, it started off small and it got bigger and bigger and bigger. And then somebody actually said, that's irrefutable. That little piece right there, you can't say no to that.
I think the big thing on that is being open. I know that there's a lot of teams, and this is beyond just client investigations, but there's a lot of teams that like to hoard locations and hoard data. That helps nobody. That helps absolutely nobody, because if you're not willing to collaborate, and I'm not, I'm not saying everybody love everyone, but if I find something specific, and I always use the Hanover Tavern as an example, because my team will go in there and investigate, and Brad's team goes in there and investigate, and we investigate in completely different ways. But when we both walk out of there with something similar, and not only that, but we can review it, because I'm not like, well, I'm not going to let you see this EVP. I'm not going to let you listen to this. If I have something that I'm like, man, what is this? I'll send it to Brad. And then when they finish their investigation and review all of their data, he sends me a copy. And so, I can check it out and see, does any of this correlate? So it helps my research, and then anything I do might potentially help his if it falls in line. So be open to sharing some of your findings. I'm not saying post them on a website. We stopped doing that a long time ago. But if you have somebody doing that work, doing that research really in the trenches with you, don't hoard it. If you've got a location that you're working with, and you think that it could benefit with other teams being in there to find something else, don't hoard it. Don't lock it down for other people to not be able to get into, because in reality, you're kind of just hurting the field in general. And then even no matter which way you approach the paranormal, if you kind of do that in a respectful manner, if you come from it from a medium perspective, and you could still apply the scientific methodology around that of building out your hypothesis, your test cases, your situations, and taking it from there, you lend a lot more credibility to how you're going about things, than if you go into a location and your first instinct is there's ghosts. You need to make sure that whatever you're doing, rule out, the normal, before you say it's something that's preternatural. You don't need to go in there and say it's a ghost, because that's where you're going to lose a lot of credibility.
You touched on peer review, and that's one thing this whole field is lacking. And I'm not talking about necessarily peer review by other investigators. I'm talking peer review in the skill areas surrounding how you operated, like, in regards, you're looking for electromagnetic fields. You need to be reviewed. Whatever you found should be reviewed by somebody that has a specialty in looking at electromagnetic fields. I mean, we have an electromagnetic engineer from the Navy in our group, and he reviews a lot of that stuff, and he can tell almost immediately, what something really is, that kind of thing. So the peer review is very important. Because if you don't have, in sharing the data and the other stuff, that's essentially peer review in itself. So, if you get peer review, and then, it's okay to be wrong. I'm never wrong, but it's okay to be wrong. And
you ask his wife that's completely
That's
different.
my job.
But no, it's serious. It's okay to be wrong, because that's all part of the scientific process. If you have a theory and you find stuff that you think proves your theory, and it's being reviewed by somebody, and then they look at it and they find a mistake in it, that's very important. So now you can go back and change your whole experimental design and go approach it from another direction. That's how science works, period. And I mean, that's in the soft sciences like psychology and sociology. That's in the hard sciences like chemistry, physics, and biology. It's like in all those.
Yeah,
So,
be humble.
Yeah,
If,
be humble.
you know, there's, I
Like
mean,
me.
yeah, like Brad. I mean, I'm consistently learning. There's so many things, you know, where even in these classes, you know, these panels, I'm still learning, or I'm relearning things or readdressing things. So be open to that. You know, none of us have the answer. You know, none of us on the panel, none of us out in Facebook world, none of us have the answer. So be humble. You know, make sure if somebody says, "Oh, you know what? No, I don't think that that's this. I think it's this." Be open to that. You know, don't be like, "Oh, no, 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 you weren't there. You don't understand." You
If
know,
your heart's in it for the right reason, you will be open and humble about it.
And one of the most humbling things that's ever happened to us was I was presenting data, and we had a brand new person that just joined the group that was a member of a data analyst for NASA at Langley, and she found a major error, and that was very humbling. That was in front of all my peers, and I'm like, "Ooh, yeah, okay, time to go back and fix that."
Yeah, but you're never wrong.
Well, we're at 2 hours and I think everybody's dropping off. But before we go, a few things I want to tell people that hopefully we're going to have in the future. Martha Decker, we want her whenever she's able to give us her presentation on interviewing clients. Heather's working on one on non-tech tools, which I'm really stoked about. And Lisa Schnur is going to do one on how to investigate a residence and people. And we're talking about doing one where we just get together and we talk about our strangest, craziest cases, just a real informal talk. And because we run into some crazy things and things that you guys need to be aware of. So anyway, thanks everybody for being here tonight. This was a lot of fun.
Enjoyed it.
And your checks
Thanks
are
for
in the
having me.
mail.
checks are in the mail. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like the stimulus checks in the mail. Yeah.
The
Exactly.
second one.
The second one.
All right. Thanks everybody for tuning in. I'm going to end the live stream.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all.
Bye.